Hi, welcome to chapter 14 of the American Pageant, Forging the National Economy from 1790 to 1860. Today we're going to talk about Westward Movement to flare-ups. So, I got a nice picture of some women working in a textile mill, and so this is kind of the first factories in American history. So let's get into the material with our nice sky blue and blue background. It's very soothing. It's nice. Westward Movement. Andrew Jackson's election exemplified the movement of America. He was the first president elected west. He was from west of the Appalachians. A lot of them from Virginia. You have Massachusetts represented. He was born in Virginia, but he lived in Tennessee. And it just showed the growing power of the American West. That settlers and people were just moving west, conquering land, being frontiersmen, and, breaking new ground, trailblazing, all these things that people catch, the wild imagination of the American West. The poet and author Ralph Waldo Emerson, Emerson, my own daughter's name is Emerson, I just mispronounced it. It must be late and I'm tired, I'm sorry. Said that Europe stretches to the Alleghenies, and America lies beyond. So basically, it's pretty civilized on the East Coast, and it looks a lot like Europe, but then you go beyond that, and there's America, right there in a little cabin in the woods, drinking moonshine. Half of Americans in 1850 were under the age of 30. We were a very young country. That's one of the cruel things about the Civil War is, a lot of the men that died, we were a very young nation, and the 620 to 750,000 estimated that died in the war. Wars usually kills a lot of young men. The life as a Western pioneer was very grim. It was bleak. Not a lot of modern technology, not a lot of luxury goods. Living in a cabin that was drafty, having to make everything. Living in continual fear of raids of Native Americans and swarms of locusts wiping out everything, you name it. It seemed like it was definitely on the edge of civilization, and it was almost, detached from that. It was very grim and tough. Pioneers were poor. They were stricken with disease. They were lonely. They didn't have neighbors for miles and miles around. And so it was a very difficult situation. There was no comforts of home. And so setting off into the frontier was just a daunting task. Leaving all your friends and loved ones behind to go live in a cabin in the woods and try to clear the forest and plant crops and do all these things that probably a lot of people don't really know how to do. And they had to, kind of learn as they went. It's very difficult to do. Emerson also coined the term self-reliance of the pioneers. That the pioneers were, they could take care of themselves. They made their own soap. They made their own clothes. They did everything for themselves. They didn't depend on merchants. They didn't depend on going to the grocery store. They simply found a way to survive and get by. So this is an interesting graphic. It shows the center of our population per decade. You can see in 1790 it's located in Maryland, and then, just north of D.C., and we keep moving and moving and moving, and now in 2010, it's in Missouri, and so it'd be interesting to see by 2020, has it jumped all the way to Missouri, has it jumped to Kansas maybe? You can also see that it's going north and south, and so our population trends today are slowly moving south and west to the Sun Belt. Thank you, air conditioning, otherwise I wouldn't be able to live in places like Arizona. So, oops, I didn't have that come all at once, but I'll figure that out. One of the first economies in the West was fur trapping. It was a large industry in the Rocky Mountain area by the 1820s. The rendezvous, or those of you who don't speak French, rendezvous, was a system for 2 decades where basically people just showed up with a bunch of beaver pelts, sold them at a big festival, bought some stuff, partied, had a good time, and then went back to the mountains and lived as a hermit for the rest of the year. For 2 decades, this was popular because the beaver pelt hat was very in fashion. So were buffalo and sea otter pelts. And then about 20 years after that, they kind of fell out of fashion. Like, oh my gosh, who wears beaver pelt hats? It's so 1835. We're wearing sea otters now, don't you know? To the point where they actually almost drove the beaver to extinction. The buffalo was almost driven to extinction. We'll talk about that later. And so this is called ecological imperialism, which is aggressive and heedless exploitation of resources. That word there makes tree huggers cry. How dare you say that? Ecological imperialism. Then basically you want to make money, just go kill all the beaver. Who cares if they I don't care is what they would say. What Americans now realize, we've got to conserve things, and you can't just wipe out a whole species. George Catlin was one of the first Americans to advocate the preservation of nature. He proposed the idea of a national park, which eventually led to Yellowstone, created in 1872, which was the world's first national park. Not Jellystone. We're not talking about Yogi Bear. There's some Native Americans living in a painting in the pristine West without the touches of man and whites to ruin it. That painting is by George Catlin at the mouth of the Platte River. There we go. Here's another painting going on here. Some Native Americans living in huts, trading with the whites. This one was by Karl Bodmer in 1833. So, by the 1800s, the population was doubling every 25 years. Americans were very prolific in the bedroom. We were very fertile people for a long time. When you do farm work, it helps to have lots of kids. You have to do less work. They can help you do all the chores. By 1860, there were 33 states, and the United States was the fourth most populous country in the Western world. It was just growing substantially. There's 33 states. That's 20 more states than the original 13 colonies. The increased population in larger cities brought about disease, decreased living standards, and so while people are moving west for opportunity, the cities are falling into disrepair. They have hordes of gangs roaming the streets, controlling everything. And New York was one of the most violent, disgusting, and dangerous places to live at that time. Boston adopted sewers in 1823 to help alleviate some of the disease problems that were going on. New York had its own piped water by 1842. In the 1840s and 50s, European immigrants came to America because Europe seemed to be running out of room. There's not a lot of land left. And there's American letters, people writing home going, hey, we got lots of land here. You should come. We don't even know where all the land is. We just know there's a lot. You just keep going west, and there's just land. You just find a place, sit down, and that's yours. Build a little cabin. And in Europe, they're looking around and like, oh, I can have a bloody postage stamp size farm. I could grow like 2 blades of grass. It'd be wonderful. And just come here. Yeah. Immigrants also came to America to escape the aristocratic caste system, the state church. There's just also more opportunities to improve your life. There's a lot of pull factors drawing people to America, and there are push factors that are forcing people to come here too because of persecution. So this transoceanic steamboats also reduced ocean travel times. It was a lot easier to get here than just sailing, and which would take up to 2 weeks at sometimes, even longer. Very uncomfortable. And now you have these steamships that just made it a lot easier of a trip. So you can see here, this is a chart that shows our white population versus our non-white. And initially it was around 19%, almost 20%. And then we became increasingly more and more white. That trend is opposite today. Our population is becoming more and more non-white. This is Irish and German immigration by the decade. A little preview of what we're going to talk about here. Hi, we're going to talk about the Irish and the Germans. Yeah. So the Emerald Isle moves west. In the 1850s, the Black 40s as they're known, many Irish came to America because of a potato blight. Very famous, the potato famine that went on in Ireland. This was the only food they had, and a blight wiped out their crops, and so millions of Irish facing starvation came to America. 2 million actually perished in Ireland of this potato blight, and the British stood by and did nothing. And 2 million arrived between 1830 and 1860, to the point that where there's more Irish people living in America now in Ireland. They were too poor to move west, and so they had to settle in the cities. Unlike many immigrants who came here with a little bit of money, they could move west, go on a wagon train or a railroad and then purchase a farm. Most of these Irish, out of desperation, came here and settled in the cities, and they were discriminated against because they were different, principally different because of their religion. Instead of being Protestant like most Americans were, the Irish were Catholic. They largely settled in Boston and New York. In fact, the first St. Patrick's Day parades were held here in America, not in Ireland. Most of the Irish were Roman Catholic, and because of this, they were despised by the Americans. They increased the competition for jobs. They were willing to work for next to nothing. which Americans claim lowered wages, and so people that lived here, that were true blue Native Americans, which is funny because the actual Native Americans are going, really? We're still here. They claimed you're driving down the wages. We can't make a good wage. We can't make a good living anymore because you are stealing our jobs. The Irish were hated. The Irish hated the blacks and they hated the British. And so there's a lot of fighting going on. They don't like each other. There's some racism going on. They formed the Ancient Order of the Hibernians as a self-help group. This is a logo of them right there. It's still around today, which helped spawn the Molly Maguires, which is an Irish miners' union. Irish people working together in self-defense. They were politically powerful, though, because they bonded together as one large voting body. And so once political machines figured this out, they mobilized the Irish and voted in the candidates that they wanted. They strongly influenced Tammany Hall, which is the machine in New York City, very quickly, and then used patronage or giving out jobs to help themselves. And so the Irish, because of their sheer numbers, became very powerful in places like New York City and Boston. Here's a St. Patrick's Day parade here. Looks like it's being held here in New York City. I had to look at the Irish. There we go. And now we just talk about the Germans. Between 1830 and 1860, many Germans came to America because of crop failures and other hardships. There was a big democratic revolution in Germany in 1848 that failed, and Germans failing to get any voice in government. Germany was a disorganized bunch of kingdoms, hundreds of kingdoms. It wasn't really a country until the 1870s. So many Germans fed up came to America because they wanted a voice in government. They wanted a chance, and they're called German 48ers. About 1.5 million Germans came to our country. Germans were still already living here in large numbers. But when Germans came, they had a little bit of material goods, they had a little bit of money, and so they were able to move west. They were largely able to escape the cities, buy farms, and settle in communities where they still spoke German and where they still kept their German traditions, like beer. Many of the big beer companies that we know today were founded by Germans. Anheuser-Busch and Budweiser was founded by Anheuser-Busch. Coors was founded by Adolf Coors. Miller was founded by Frederick Miller. All Germans. The Germans moved to the Middle West, mainly in Wisconsin. The Germans were more educated than the Americans in terms of reading and writing. They're also mainly opposed slavery. Many of their cultural practices were suspicious to Americans. Just some of the things they did. German American was one of the largest white groups in America until the World Wars, and at that point, German Americans virtually disappeared. Not that they left the country; they just kind of covered up their German roots for fear of backlash, and there was a lot of hatred towards Germans, specifically in World War I, and then later with World War II with the Nazis. And so Germans kind of went away. There's still strong elements of it still today, but nothing like it was in the 1800s. Americans were suspicious that those Germans drank beer on Sundays, and you just shouldn't do that. Saturday night, cool. Friday night, cool. Sunday, you beast, you heathen, go back to Germany. Some contributed greatly. The idea of the kindergarten, came from Germans. And so we have kindergarten, yes, which, everything you need to know about life you learn in kindergarten. So here's some problems, though. Massive immigration led to some nativist movements. We still have some issues today, don't we, with immigration? And so Americans who felt like they were born here and they had generation after generation, they were true Native Americans. They were nativists, is what we are. They're old stock Americans. They feared that immigrants are taking our jobs. They're going to outbreed us. They're going to outvote us. They're going to overwhelm them. We need to put those immigrants back in their place. We need to build a wall. Oh, we can't do that yet. Okay, let's just intimidate them, scare them. The Roman Catholics created an entirely separate Catholic educational system because they wanted to avoid the Protestant educational system. So you get all these Catholic schools that pop up all across the country, and so this fueled the fire of the nativists. I mean, look at them. They're forming their own schools. They're trying to take over those crazy Catholics. Which is always strange. They both worship Jesus. Just get along. He's a cool guy. Worship Jesus. Yay. The American Party, which was also known as the Know Nothing Party, was created by Native Americans. not native capitalized, but those who thought they lived here, who opposed immigrants. It's actually a secret anti-Catholic society, this American party. And so people, when they were asked about it, like, hey, I heard you're in this party. Like, I don't know. They're like, what do you know? No, I heard you're in I want to join. Like, I know nothing. No, I don't know. Like, can you tell me anything about your secret anti-Catholic society? I know nothing. Until they became known as the Know Nothing Party. Not that they were stupid or anything. So they started as a secret anti-Catholic society. They were strong in 1852, and sayonara, you're gone by 1856. Very, very brief party, kind of like the Tea Party in recent memory for the Republicans. Um, the Know Nothing Party. There's an old show called Hogan's Heroes that had Sergeant Schultz, this big fat German Nazi guy. I mean, who makes a comedy about Nazi POW camps? That was the 70s. And every time the Americans and the British would escape, Colonel Klink would ask Sergeant Schultz, what happened? You go, I know nothing, I see nothing, I hear nothing. I don't do that very well. That's before my time, I'm sorry. Many people died, sadly, in riots and attacks between American natives and immigrants. There's riots in cities. You have a lot of that going on in New York City. Boston, a convent was burned in 1834. In Philadelphia, you have riots in 1844 with 13 dead, 50 wounded. And the American economy, though, needs immigrants to fuel the Industrial Revolution. With these growing factories they're going to be talking about here, they need cheap labor. Immigrants provided it. Here's Sergeant Schultz there. I know nothing. A lot of anti-Irish stuff going on. Help wanted. No Irish need apply. And here's, hey, the Legend of Zelda. Yeah, Zelda 2 right there. Sorry, I know nothing. Here's a picture from the movie The Gangs of New York, a very famous Martin Scorsese film about. You see a lot of the Irish versus the native stock, with Bill the Butcher here and all that. And it captures a lot of the stuff that goes on. It's fictionalized, probably a little too violent, but it does, like I said, capture political machines. It captures the draft rights of 1863, and then that whole struggle between the Irish and the native stock Americans. So if you ever get a chance and you want to watch a rated R movie, check out The Gangs of New York. So here's a mosaic of the Germans where they are most heavily influenced. You can see in the Midwest, mainly in Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota. My grandmother was from Kansas, and she always said that we didn't learn Germans. We didn't like that squareheads. What she called them. I always told her, I said, Grandma, my mom, and we're all German. She just ignored it. Oh well. So this is an interesting one. Most commonly spoken language other than English or Spanish. So if you take away the two predominant languages of the United States, you see a lot of German, don't you? Here in Colorado, actually a lot of German. You wouldn't be probably a little surprised to see Vietnamese in Texas, aren't you? But kind of an interesting map there. Pick out your state, wherever you are. Hey, you're Virginia. You got Korean. Have fun. Go learn it. Here's the Irish. Whiskey and the lager beer Germans stealing the ballot box. Oh, those immigrants are stealing our jobs and they're stealing our election. Gotta stop them. All right, we'll stop there. Hope you have any comments or questions. Let me know. Have a good evening.